Caitlin Clark was benched in the first quarter of this game. And after that, she started getting in foul trouble, and she was benched throughout the majority of this game. I don't have the energy to even make a video right now. I'm just so mad, guys. Final score 84-100. I am so fucking mad right now.
Are we genuinely at this junction once more? Absolutely. Except now, the supporting material and record-keeping are even more inadequate than before. The events that unfolded at Gainbridge Fieldhouse this past Saturday evening did not constitute a close competitive defeat. This was not simply an instance of poor shooting accuracy absorbed by a squad that otherwise maintained its foundational coherence and tactical discipline. What transpired represented a comprehensive, top-to-bottom, franchise-wide breakdown that resulted in a 16-point demolition delivered by an organization that had not participated in a single WNBA regular season contest prior to the month of May in the year 2026. Every single element contributing to this failure, including the offensive implosion, the catastrophic breakdown in interior defensive coverage, the questionable decisions regarding player rotation and substitution patterns, ongoing questions surrounding injury disclosure transparency that have shadowed this franchise for multiple weeks now, was plainly observable on the basketball court, quantifiable within the statistical record, and directly linkable to tactical and strategic choices that the coaching staff executed before the opening tip, throughout the duration of live competition and following the game's most decisive and critical moments. The final scoreline read 84-100 in favor of the Portland Fire. The season record now stands at 4 victories against 4 defeats. The fundamental structural questions that emerge from this outcome are not the sort that will spontaneously resolve through the passage of time or minor tweaking. Let us construct the complete analytical documentation, beginning at the precise location where every discussion of accountability regarding this basketball team must originate.
Saying different things about Caitlin Clark. How can you be in rhythm when the referees call every foul for you just touching the damn basketball? The lineups has been just so horrendous. And I never thought I'd be saying this, but I wish we had Christy Sides, bro. At this point, it is brutal to watch. Indiana Fever is currently in the final seconds of this basketball game. It is so bad tonight that Stephanie White is actually she's trending.
Caitlin Clark participated in 21 minutes and 44 seconds of game action. She accumulated 6 total points while converting 1 of 7 attempted field goals, translating to a shooting efficiency of 14.3%. She failed to connect on either of her 2 attempts from beyond the 3-point arc. Her plus-minus statistical measure for the entire contest registered at -8. Position these numerical outputs directly alongside the performance trajectory documented across the preceding 14-day period. When combining her last 2 game performances together, Clark has successfully made 4 field goals out of 19 total attempts, producing a 21% shooting conversion rate. Her 3-point shooting percentage, which had been positioned at 44% during a 4-game stretch just 14 days prior, has now fallen to 0 across 2 consecutive game appearances. The degradation in performance output is not a singular game statistical outlier or random variance. This represents a documented 2-game trend with a specific directional trajectory and negative momentum, and this decline is occurring simultaneously alongside a physical condition that the coaching staff has not addressed with the level of transparency that the collective bargaining agreement reporting requirements, particularly following the situation that emerged from the Portland game 2 weeks earlier, made institutionally mandatory. Clark personally characterized her back condition as something that shifts out of proper alignment rather quickly. That statement constitutes a player's direct description of an ongoing recurring physical limitation, not a fully resolved acute injury event. The game-time scratch that occurred immediately prior to the initial Portland matchup, the specific incident that triggered the formal WNBA league warning for organizational non-compliance with injury reporting protocols, was officially attributed to back stiffness. The reductions in playing minutes across the 2 subsequent losing efforts are documentable facts within the statistical record. The analytical possibility that head coach White is actively managing Clark's minute allocation with awareness of a physical limitation that is not being communicated to the public represents not mere speculation, but rather the analytically sound inference derived from the established pattern of reporting transparency failures that have been documented. What cannot be defended under any legitimate physical management rationale whatsoever is the specific rotation substitution decision that came to define the game's critical early developmental phase.
The Portland Fire has made 52 points in the paint. 52 2 points in the paint. They're literally picking the Indiana Fever apart. They have no bigs. The entire front office needs to be fired.
Stephanie White removed Clark from active competition during the first quarter of play. The tactical decision to extract a shooting guard who is already experiencing shooting difficulties, already navigating through the specific mechanical disruption and rhythm disturbance that accompanies any shooting slump, and to position her on the bench throughout the time period when the game's competitive intensity and tactical temperature are being initially established, represents a rotation choice with direct and documentable performance consequences that extend beyond the immediate moment. A player working through a shooting slump requires continuity within the possession context and game flow. She requires the rhythmic continuity of sequential offensive reads, sequential catch-point opportunities, sequential defensive engagements, and interactions to reconstruct the mechanical groove and cognitive rhythm that generates efficient shot selection and successful scoring outcomes. Removing her from that essential continuity, positioning her in a passive observation role on the sideline, and subsequently returning her to active competition against a defensive scheme that has now gained additional preparation time to refine its coverage strategy and tactical approach, this substitution sequence operates in direct opposition to the performance recovery process that shooting slump remediation requires. Clark returned to the floor following her bench period, and subsequently fouled out of the contest entirely, accumulating 5 personal fouls that resulted in her complete disqualification from further participation. The player who serves as the generative engine of the Fever's entire offensive identity, who creates the floor spacing and decision-making pressure that simplifies and enhances every other roster member's functional role, spent the entirety of the fourth quarter in street clothes as a spectator. This occurred in a game that the Fever lost by 16 points.
Lexi Hall was horrendous tonight. And I hate to say that for Lexi, man. Lexi was 0-4 from the field, 0-4 from 3. And once again, the Indiana Fever has no-name players getting... Who the fuck is Megan Gustafsson? She had 22 points, 8. She couldn't miss. Megan couldn't miss. 88 from the field. 1-on-1. She shot 100%, bro. She missed 1 free throw. Megan did. I don't even know who Megan is.
The fan response and reaction to Saturday's outcome represents a specific category of organizational intelligence and feedback that front office leadership groups with genuine institutional self-awareness treat with serious consideration and analytical respect. Indiana Fever supporters, the identical fan base that sustained multiple years of organizational patience and rebuilding, and whose financial commitment and ticket purchasing behavior has been documented extensively across this channel's comprehensive coverage of the ticketing revenue reporting situation, are now actively and publicly expressing nostalgia for a coaching staff that they previously demanded be removed and replaced. When a fan base reaches the psychological and emotional threshold where the prior coaching regime is retrospectively viewed as an improvement and upgrade over the current one, the credibility deficit and trust gap facing the current coaching staff has crossed a categorical threshold that press conference language, public relations messaging, and verbal reassurances cannot adequately address or repair. It can only be addressed and reversed through tangible on-court results and winning outcomes. Saturday's outcome moved the trajectory in the precisely opposite direction. The interior defensive performance breakdown requires its own separate and comprehensive documentary examination.
And Steph White are both trending. Fever fans want her to be left behind in Portland. Stephanie White coaching is criminal. Let's just pull up the latest, bro. Let's just pull up the latest. Fire Stephanie White and Amber Cox. This next week. The experiment is over. It's definitely over. Cannot believe what the front office plus Stephanie White plus her atrocious coaching staff has done to once-in-a-lifetime player in Kayla Clark and Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston. This is
Aaliyah Boston. The Portland Fire scored 52 points within the painted area, 52 interior points against an Indiana Fever roster whose foundational defensive architectural design positions Aaliyah Boston as the primary rim protection presence and interior scoring deterrent. Boston concluded the game with a plus-minus rating of -14, representing the single worst plus-minus mark across the entire Fever roster for that contest. The defensive scheme and tactical structure that positioned her within the specific defensive context that produced that statistical outcome against the particular offensive actions and play designs that Portland was executing throughout the game represents a coaching staff responsibility and tactical design question. Players execute their roles within the systems and structures provided to them. Systems and structures are designed, implemented, and adjusted by the coaching staff leadership. A 52-point paint scoring total surrendered, while your own starting center is on the floor in a game your team loses by 16 points, does not constitute a player performance failure occurring in isolation from other factors. This represents a systemic defensive design failure with clear coaching origins and tactical responsibility. Megan Gustafson accumulated 22 points while shooting 88% from the field. Gustafson is an established, productive professional player with a legitimate WNBA-level skill set. She is not, however, a player who should achieve 88% field goal conversion against a competently structured and properly executed defensive scheme in a regular season professional game. The coverage breakdowns and defensive assignment failures that produce that extraordinary efficiency line are visible and identifiable within the game footage and video record. These breakdowns are the direct product of a defensive scheme that failed to identify and successfully close off Gustafson's specific preferred catch points and receiving locations, failed to contest her preferred finishing angles and scoring positions near the basket, and failed to execute the necessary real-time tactical adjustments that 88% field goal shooting production during the first half of a competitive game absolutely demands from any competent coaching staff. When a player of average offensive capability, and this assessment carries no disrespect toward Gustafson's legitimate professional career accomplishments, shoots near-perfect percentages from the field against your defensive structure, the analytically sound explanation is not that the offensive player suddenly achieved elite-level performance capacity. The explanation is that the defensive structure and scheme failed to present her with the appropriate difficulty level and defensive resistance that professional-level competition inherently requires. The current record and performance trajectory require honest and complete documentation without editorial softening or optimistic reframing. The Indiana Fever hold a record of 4 wins against 4 losses. They have lost 4 of their last 5 game contests after opening the season with a 3-win, 1-loss record through 4 games. The shooting slump affecting Clark now spans 2 complete games and sits at 21% field goal conversion across that 2-game sample. The interior defensive structure has now produced a 52-point paint scoring performance surrendered to a first-year expansion franchise without prior WNBA regular season history. The rotation management and substitution decision-making during Saturday's game removed the team's primary offensive creator and engine during the game's rhythm-establishing early period and failed to return her to active floor participation in sufficient time to materially affect the competitive outcome. The structural problems that this channel specifically identified and documented during the Fever's first game of the current season, including the secondary shot creation deficit, the pick-and-roll action underutilization, and the ongoing tension between Clark's natural offensive role and skill set and the system that White is attempting to implement and install, have not been resolved or adequately addressed. These foundational problems have been compounded and amplified by a physical condition surrounding Clark that the coaching staff's public communication and disclosure has not adequately addressed with appropriate transparency. The schedule of upcoming opponents does not provide a forgiving or soft landing for a team operating in this current condition and trajectory. The competitive margin available for further structural delay and tactical indecision is not expanding with time, but rather contracting with each subsequent result. The Clark physical situation represents the most urgent non-negotiable priority requiring immediate resolution. If her back condition is materially affecting her shooting mechanics, her release timing and consistency, and her ability to generate the lower body power and drive that makes her deep-range shooting capacity viable and effective, that constitutes information the team's medical staff and coaching leadership currently possesses. The collective bargaining agreement reporting framework, the same framework that the organization already has received a formal documented warning for violating, exists in part precisely to ensure that information relevant to Clark's competitive availability and physical condition is managed with appropriate institutional transparency and timely public disclosure. The documented pattern of minute reductions across losing games, combined with Clark's own personal characterization of her back's recurring and chronic nature, combined with the shooting performance trajectory documented across the last 2 games, produces an analytical picture and evidentiary pattern that demands direct and honest public communication from the coaching staff, not managed deflection or vague reassurances. The trade conversation and speculation that is beginning to surface and circulate within fan discourse and online discussion is worth acknowledging in purely analytical terms, not because such a transaction represents the correct immediate conclusion or recommended course of action, but because the emergence of such speculation at the 4-win, 4-loss mark of the season, just 8 games into the campaign, signals something specific and meaningful about the current state of the organizational trust relationship between Clark and the franchise. Players possessing Clark's generational caliber and transformative talent level do not generate trade speculation and discussion among their own fan base. Just 8 games into a season without an underlying institutional reality and organizational dysfunction that is actively producing and fueling that conversation. The underlying institutional reality has been documented with evidence. It has been comprehensively documented on this channel across the full arc of the 2026 season to this point. The question of whether the organization possesses the capability and institutional will to correct course before the window of opportunity for meaningful correction closes entirely is the only analytically relevant question that remains unanswered. This is WNBA Pro. Subscribe to this channel now and activate notifications to receive the full film room breakdown examining the structural defensive failures and the Clark physical situation as additional information becomes available and is disclosed. Leave your analytically grounded assessment and perspective in the comments section below. Does Saturday's result represent a correctable performance slump occurring within a system that retains the internal capacity to self-adjust and improve, or does the 4-win, 4-loss record, combined with the interior defensive collapse and the Clark shooting trajectory, constitute documented evidence of a structural problem and systemic dysfunction that rotation adjustments and minor tactical tweaking alone cannot solve or repair? Every film-literate perspective and informed viewpoint contributed in that comment section carries analytical value and matters to this ongoing evaluation. We will see you in the next video installment.